Picture this: 1971, Beverly Hills. A young Clint Eastwood walks into the opulent office of one of Hollywood's most powerful executives. The man behind the mahogany desk barely looks up from his papers as Eastwood pitches a directing project. After a dismissive glance, the executive leans back in his leather chair and delivers what he thinks is career advice. "Clint, you're a good actor. Stick to taking direction." But directing? That's not for cowboys. Leave the real filmmaking to the professionals. The room falls silent. Eastwood doesn't argue. He doesn't slam his fist on the desk or storm out dramatically. Instead, he does something far more unsettling. He simply nods once, stands up with deliberate calm, and walks out without saying another word. The executive immediately forgets the encounter, dismissing it as just another failed pitch meeting. Fast forward 25 years. The Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, Academy Awards night, 1993. That same executive sits in the audience, watching in stunned recognition as Clint Eastwood walks to the stage to accept his second Academy Award for Best Director, this time for Unforgiven, a film that would redefine the Western genre and cement his legacy as one of cinema's greatest auteurs. The executive's name has been forgotten by Hollywood history. Eastwood's lesson was etched in gold. Respect isn't demanded through confrontation. It's earned through relentless excellence and unwavering principle. But what happens when that hard-earned respect isn't given? What occurs when Hollywood's most unforgiving perfectionist encounters not just professional disagreement, but outright disrespect, public mockery, or personal betrayal? Over his 7-decade career, Clint Eastwood has collaborated with hundreds of industry professionals: actors, directors, producers, writers. The vast majority remember him as demanding but fair, a man of few words but profound integrity, someone who kept his promises and expected the same in return. However, there are 5 names that tell a dramatically different story. 5 celebrities who discovered that crossing Clint Eastwood doesn't result in explosive confrontations, public feuds, or Hollywood dramatics. Instead, it results in something far more devastating and final: complete and permanent exile from his professional world. Not temporary anger that fades with time, not eventual reconciliation brokered by agents, but total erasure, as if they simply ceased to exist in his universe. These aren't stories of petty Hollywood drama or manufactured celebrity controversy. They're case studies in how one man's uncompromising principles shaped not just his legendary career, but every relationship within it. Today we're examining the ironclad code that Clint Eastwood has lived by for over 7 decades, and the devastating consequences when that sacred code is broken. To understand these conflicts, we must first understand the man behind them. Clint Eastwood wasn't born into Hollywood privilege or raised in the entertainment industry's protective bubble. He grew up during the harsh realities of the Great Depression in a working-class family that moved constantly across California as his father, Clinton Sr., searched for steady employment. They lived in Oakland, then Redding, then a dozen small towns, never staying anywhere long enough for young Clint to establish lasting friendships or feel truly settled. This nomadic childhood taught him lessons that would define his entire approach to life and work: absolute self-reliance, uncompromising work ethic, and above all, the sacred importance of keeping your word when everything else feels uncertain. If you promised something, you delivered. If you committed to being somewhere, you showed up early. If you gave someone your trust, you expected the same in return. When he finally discovered his passion for jazz music as a teenager, these values deepened. He spent countless hours listening to masters like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and Miles Davis, musicians who achieved perfection through relentless discipline and an almost religious dedication to their craft. Jazz taught him that true artistry came from preparation meeting spontaneity, from knowing your craft so thoroughly that you could make the extraordinarily difficult appear effortless. Military service during the Korean War further cemented these principles. Serving as a swimming instructor at Fort Ord, Eastwood learned about chain of command, respect for authority, and the potentially life-or-death consequences of following through on commitments. These weren't abstract concepts. They were survival skills where a broken promise or moment of disrespect could have real consequences for real people. When he arrived in Hollywood in the 1950s, Eastwood brought this background with him like armor. He wasn't the fastest talker, the most charming networker, or the most politically astute operator. He was something else entirely in that environment. Utterly, completely dependable. When he said he'd be somewhere, he arrived early. When he committed to a project, he delivered exactly what he promised. When he gave his word, it carried the weight of a legal contract. This reliability became his calling card and his competitive advantage. Directors and producers learned that casting Eastwood meant getting someone who would arrive prepared, know his lines perfectly, understand his character completely, and deliver professional quality work without drama, delay, or excuse. The first major crack in Eastwood's typically diplomatic public persona came in 2005, during what should have been a routine industry celebration. The National Board of Review Awards ceremony was proceeding with the usual Hollywood pageantry, acceptance speeches, networking, polite applause, when Clint Eastwood took the stage and delivered a line that made the entire room collectively hold its breath. "Michael Moore and I actually have a lot in common," Eastwood began, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that had made him famous. The audience smiled, expecting typical award show banter. "We both appreciate documentaries." A few polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. Then came the verbal sledgehammer. "But if he ever shows up at my front door with a camera, I'll kill him." The silence that followed was deafening. This wasn't Eastwood's usual dry humor or self-deprecating wit. The delivery was too flat, too serious, too final. The audience's nervous laughter revealed what everyone in that room understood instinctively. They had just witnessed something unprecedented. Clint Eastwood, the absolute master of diplomatic silence, had just declared war. To understand why this moment was so significant and so out of character, we need to examine what Michael Moore represented to Eastwood beyond simple political differences. Moore had achieved massive commercial and critical success with Fahrenheit 9/11, a documentary that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes and became the highest-grossing documentary in cinema history. The film was praised for its boldness, its political courage, and its willingness to challenge the most powerful institutions in America. But Eastwood's issue wasn't with Moore's success, his politics, or even his conclusions. It was with his methods and what those methods represented about the filmmaker's character. Moore's confrontational approach, his ambush-style interviews, his theatrical insertions of himself into serious political discourse, and his transformation of national tragedy into entertainment spectacle violated everything Eastwood believed about integrity, respect for subjects, and the responsibility that comes with holding a camera. The timing of Eastwood's comment wasn't coincidental. In 2005, he was deep in pre-production for Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, his ambitious dual films about the Battle of Iwo Jima. These projects represented everything Eastwood believed documentary-style filmmaking should be: meticulously researched, respectful to all parties involved, historically accurate, and focused on honoring rather than exploiting the people whose stories were being told. The Spike Lee feud exposed deeper issues about artistic responsibility. In 2008, Eastwood released his Iwo Jima double feature, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. Critics praised the project's scope, but Lee saw a glaring omission. He publicly criticized Eastwood for excluding African American soldiers from Flags of Our Fathers, pointing out that Black Marines had served and died at Iwo Jima. Eastwood's response was uncharacteristically blunt. A guy like him should shut his face. The comment shocked Hollywood because it was so unlike his measured persona. Lee fired back. "I'm not going to shut up. He sounds like an angry old man." The conflict exposed fundamental differences in approaching historical films. Lee believed any historical film had a responsibility to tell the complete story, especially marginalized voices. Eastwood approached historical films as specific stories about specific people, not comprehensive textbooks. Flags of Our Fathers followed the six flag raisers in the famous photograph. Including other perspectives would have diluted the narrative Eastwood was telling. But Lee's criticism touched on Hollywood's history of excluding black stories, making Eastwood's Japanese perspective film, while ignoring African Americans, seem tone-deaf. The feud revealed something about Eastwood's character. He could accept film criticism, but couldn't accept challenges to his integrity. Lee's critique implied deliberate exclusion, which Eastwood interpreted as an attack on his character rather than his artistic choices. Neither director has acknowledged the other since 2008. In an industry built on networking, this permanent estrangement is both rare and telling. The DiCaprio conflict was fundamentally different from the others because it wasn't about politics, principles, or personal attacks. It was about process, and it revealed something fascinating about how different generations approach creative excellence. When Eastwood cast Leonardo DiCaprio as J. Edgar Hoover in his 2011 biographical drama, J. Edgar, it seemed like a perfect match on paper. One of Hollywood's most meticulous directors, working with one of its most dedicated and methodical actors. Instead, it became a masterclass in professional incompatibility that demonstrated how even mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence can sometimes be insufficient to bridge fundamental differences in working style. The problems began on the very first day of filming and stemmed from completely opposing philosophies about how great performances are created. Eastwood's directing style had been refined and perfected over 4 decades and dozens of films. He believed deeply in extensive pre-production planning, minimal on-set rehearsal, and decisive execution. His typical approach was to block a scene once with the actors, run through it briefly to check technical elements, then shoot it immediately while the energy was fresh and spontaneous. DiCaprio's approach, shaped by his reputation as one of Hollywood's most serious method actors, was the complete opposite. Fresh off his Oscar-nominated performance in The Aviator and his acclaimed work in Inception, he was at the absolute height of his reputation for intense preparation and emotional authenticity. His process involved extensive exploration of scenes from multiple angles, trying different emotional approaches, and diving deep into character psychology through extended discussion and experimentation. The clash between these two approaches created immediate and obvious tension that rippled through the entire production. Sources on set described it as watching two master craftsmen speaking completely different languages while trying to build the same house. DiCaprio would ask for additional takes to explore a scene's emotional range and find different truthful moments, while Eastwood had already captured what he needed and moved on mentally to the next shot. When DiCaprio requested time to discuss character motivation or explore alternative interpretations, Eastwood would offer a brief, cryptic response and expect that to be sufficient guidance. One particularly revealing incident occurred during a pivotal scene where Hoover confronts his own mortality and legacy. DiCaprio, seeking to understand his character's internal emotional state, asked Eastwood how he thought Hoover would be feeling in that moment. Eastwood's response was characteristically terse: scared. When DiCaprio pressed for more psychological detail or context, Eastwood simply repeated, "Scared," and walked away to check the camera setup, considering the discussion closed. The Rogen conflict was the most public and personally wounding. In December 2014, after American Sniper's release, Rogen tweeted, "American Sniper kind of reminds me of the movie that's showing in the third act of Inglourious Basterds, the one where the Nazi sniper is killing allies." The comparison was inflammatory, essentially comparing Eastwood's tribute to Nazi propaganda. The tweet exploded across social media and mainstream publications. Unlike previous conflicts in industry trades, this erupted everywhere simultaneously. What made it devastating was its public nature and personal attack on Eastwood's military respect. American Sniper, had been deeply personal. Months of research, family interviews, military consultations. To have it compared to Nazi propaganda felt like betrayal of his careful, respectful approach. Eastwood's response was characteristic silence, but insiders described him as livid. The controversy revealed fundamental differences. Rogen was comfortable with provocative social media statements. Eastwood believed in letting work speak for itself.